Human relationships, at their core, are a reflection of the internal psyche. What we encounter in the outer world, particularly in our closest relationships, is often a projection of our unconscious mind. When we are confronted with negative feelings from someone we are close to, we must first examine the shadow within ourselves. The shadow, that hidden part of our psyche that we suppress, can create distortions in how we perceive others. These distortions lead us to misunderstand the motives and actions of those around us. Yet, it is not solely the other person who carries the weight of this darkness. We must be willing to recognize that we, too, may harbor unconscious animosity which we project onto others. To truly understand the dynamics of any relationship, we must first begin with self-awareness. Without introspection, we will forever be trapped in the mire of our projections, unable to see the truth of what lies before us. When we sense hostility or malice in someone close to us, it is not merely an external event, it is a mirror of our own inner turmoil. It may be that the conflict we experience is an expression of our own repressed desires or fears that we cannot face. In that case, it is not solely the person who hates us, but the conflict within us that distorts the reality of the relationship. We must also understand that when someone close to us harbors ill will, it is often the result of unconscious envy, jealousy, or even a refusal to confront their own inner conflicts. They may not even recognize the resentment they carry, as it is buried deep within their unconscious. The complexities of the human psyche are such that our negative emotions are rarely overt and direct. They manifest instead in subtle signs, behaviors that speak louder than words. Thus, the signs of hidden animosity are often not immediately recognizable. We must be attuned to these subtle gestures, for they can reveal more about the other person's hidden world than any overt confrontation. The human being, as I have always said, is an enigma, both to themselves and to others. Understanding the undercurrents of this mystery requires patience, introspection, and a willingness to face the uncomfortable truths within. The first sign that someone close to you may secretly harbor feelings of hatred is the presence of passive-aggressive behavior. This is a behavior so deeply embedded in the unconscious that it can be difficult to notice at first. It appears as indirect hostility, masked by seemingly benign actions or words. They may smile at you, while their words carry the sharp edge of contempt. This is a defense mechanism, a way of expressing frustration without directly confronting it. It is often born from an inability to communicate emotions openly, which stems from an unconscious fear of confrontation and vulnerability. Such behavior is often seen in the form of sarcasm, backhanded compliments, or the withholding of affection. They may feign concern, but their actions suggest indifference or even disdain. Their words may tell one story, but their eyes or body language tell another. The unconscious mind of the individual is constantly at odds with their conscious self, and this dissonance results in a behavior that is contradictory, often confusing, and manipulative. Passive-aggressive behavior arises not from a place of active hatred, but from unresolved inner conflict that the individual is too afraid to face directly. In relationships, this creates a subtle tension, a simmering hostility that never quite boils over into open conflict. The person may seem friendly enough on the surface, yet there is a feeling of coldness or distance that pervades the interaction. You may find yourself questioning their sincerity, for their words fail to align with their actions. It is as though you are never quite sure where you stand with them, as they avoid direct expression of their true feelings. It is essential, however, to approach this behavior with empathy. Passive-aggressive individuals are often struggling with their own unresolved emotional issues. Their behavior is an externalization of an internal conflict that they have not yet the courage to face. If we are to heal this relationship, we must first attempt to uncover the root of their inner turmoil, as difficult as it may be. Yet, this will require us to confront our own projections and be mindful of the subtle ways in which we, too, may be contributing to the cycle. Another sign of hidden animosity is the subtle withdrawal of affection. At the start of a relationship, the energy between two people is vibrant, warm, and full of mutual regard. Yet, over time, there may come a slow erosion of this affection, unnoticed at first, but gradually becoming more apparent. This withdrawal can take many forms: less frequent communication, less eye contact, and a coldness in their demeanor. Such behavior may not always be immediately recognized for what it is, a form of rejection and contempt that exists beneath the surface. This withdrawal often stems from unresolved emotional pain. The individual may feel betrayed, neglected, or even threatened by the relationship. Rather than confront these feelings, they withdraw, creating distance as a defense mechanism. This can be incredibly painful for the other person, as it seems to come without explanation. It is a form of emotional abandonment that is not always overt, yet it cuts deeply. The absence of warmth and kindness is a form of rejection that can leave one feeling isolated and confused. Yet, it is important to recognize that this behavior often arises not from hatred of the other person, but from unresolved inner conflict or insecurity within the individual. The withdrawal of affection is not necessarily a conscious act of malice. It is, instead, a reflection of their inability to express their true feelings. Their hatred, if it can even be called that, is often an unconscious reaction to their own inner fears, frustrations, and unresolved emotional turmoil. To heal such a relationship, both parties must first recognize the psychological forces at play. The one who withdraws must confront the sources of their inner conflict and learn to communicate their feelings more honestly. The one who is left feeling abandoned must seek to understand the unconscious dynamics at work and not immediately resort to feelings of guilt, anger, or self-blame. Only through mutual understanding and open communication can the relationship be restored. Another clear sign of hidden hatred is the consistent pattern of subtle criticism and undermining remarks. These comments often come disguised as constructive criticism or friendly advice, yet underneath them lies an intent to diminish or belittle the other person. The words may seem harmless, even well-meaning, but they are laced with judgment and scorn. They are designed not to encourage growth, but to chip away at the other person's self-esteem, often without them even realizing it. This behavior is often an unconscious reflection of the individual's own unresolved feelings of inadequacy. They may see in the other person qualities they admire but cannot accept in themselves. This envy, masked as criticism, becomes a defense mechanism, lowering the value of the other person. They protect their fragile sense of self-worth. The critical remarks are rarely direct, often coming in the form of subtle insinuations, comparisons, or pointed observations that cast doubt on the other person's abilities or intentions. It is in the realm of self-esteem that such actions truly take root. When we feel threatened by the presence or success of another, our unconscious mind seeks ways to diminish their importance. This can manifest in relationships with people we are closest to, as the proximity creates both admiration and fear. Rather than confront these fears directly, the person resorts to undermining behavior, hiding their true feelings beneath layers of seemingly innocent commentary. To navigate this, one must learn to identify these patterns and not allow them to shape their perception of themselves. It is important to separate the critic from the criticism, to understand that the attacks are not a reflection of your worth, but a projection of the other's insecurities. If you find yourself the target of such remarks, do not immediately react with defensiveness. Instead, take the opportunity to reflect on what this dynamic reveals about the other person's inner world and how you might create space for more open communication. In relationships, inconsistency is often a telling sign of hidden feelings. One moment, a person may act as if they deeply care for you, while in the next moment, they appear indifferent or even hostile. This back-and-forth behavior can create emotional confusion as you struggle to understand where you truly stand. Such inconsistency is often a defense mechanism, a way for the individual to keep you at arm's length while simultaneously avoiding the confrontation that would expose their true feelings. This inconsistency can manifest in a variety of ways. They may alternate between affection and distance, or between warmth and coldness, leaving you unable to predict their behavior. Such emotional vacillation often stems from inner turmoil, deep-seated feelings of resentment or fear that they are unwilling or unable to face. The person may feel conflicted about their emotions and are unable to reconcile the different parts of themselves, leading to a confused and contradictory way of relating to others. It is important to recognize that the inconsistency is not a reflection of your worth, but of the internal conflict of the other person. They may not even realize the extent to which their emotions are fluctuating, as it is driven by unconscious forces. The inability to resolve inner contradictions results in a behavior that is both erratic and damaging to those around them. To deal with such a person, it is crucial to maintain your own emotional equilibrium. Do not mirror their inconsistency, but instead strive for clarity and consistency within yourself. Set boundaries that protect your emotional well-being and insist on open, honest communication. It is only through this clarity that both parties can begin to heal the divide that their unconscious fears have created. There exists a form of covert hostility that often masquerades as a plea for help, a call for sympathy or care. This behavior, guilt-tripping, is one of the most insidious ways that someone may silently express their resentment. It is a subtle manipulation that invokes a sense of obligation or duty in the other person, making them feel as though they are responsible for the emotional well-being of the one harboring ill will. In this way, the individual ensures that their unspoken hostility is neither confronted nor exposed, but rather redirected into the emotional labor of the other. Guilt-tripping is rarely overt. It is often delivered in the form of insinuations, heavy sighs, or veiled statements that imply you have wronged them, even when no wrong has occurred. This creates an emotional pressure, a sense of indebtedness that weighs on your conscience. It forces you into a position of emotional servitude, where you are expected to continually give, without ever receiving the same in return. The individual may present themselves as a victim, thus diverting attention away from their own unresolved feelings, and manipulating you into feeling responsible for their internal strife. Yet, as with all unconscious behaviors, this too has its roots in a deeper fear of rejection and vulnerability. The one who guilt-trips others often fears being abandoned, unseen, or unimportant. Rather than confronting these fears directly, they mask them through manipulation. They seek to keep the other person in a state of perpetual guilt, thereby ensuring that the relationship remains lopsided, with them occupying the position of emotional dominance. To address this, we must not fall into the trap of self-blame or excessive responsibility. It is not our duty to manage the emotional well-being of others, particularly when such efforts are not reciprocated. One must set boundaries, recognizing that love and care must be mutual to be healthy. By acknowledging the manipulative nature of guilt-tripping, we can begin to dismantle the dynamic and confront the unspoken hostility beneath the surface. There is perhaps no more strikingly deceptive gesture than the smile that masks true feelings. It is the smile that is not born of warmth, but of hidden contempt. Such a smile does not communicate joy or affection. Rather, it is an instrument of passive aggression. It serves to maintain the illusion of harmony while simultaneously concealing deeper resentment. Behind the smile lies a wellspring of frustration, anger, and animosity that is carefully hidden from view. The person who wears such a mask often fears that their true feelings will be exposed. To smile, to act pleasant, becomes a defense mechanism, a way to present an acceptable face to the world while guarding the turmoil within. This is a reflection of their internal conflict. They wish to maintain the relationship, but cannot reconcile their deeper emotions. They want to appear agreeable, yet their unconscious mind betrays them through the incongruity of their smile. It becomes a facade that, while maintaining the outer form of civility, provides no real connection. A smile of contempt is often accompanied by a coldness that runs deeper than mere politeness. It is a smile that never quite reaches the eyes, a gesture that lacks the warmth of genuine emotion. You may feel it in the way their gaze flickers away, or in the way their body language remains rigid, even while their mouth offers a socially acceptable grin. This disconnect, this gap between appearance and reality, is often a subconscious attempt to suppress what is truly felt. The individual may not even be consciously aware of the contempt they harbor, but it is felt nonetheless. To address this, one must acknowledge the presence of this deceit without mirroring it. It is crucial not to allow such a smile to dictate your own emotional state. A smile that betrays its true nature can be disorienting, but it is a sign that there is more to the relationship than meets the eye. The person may be engaging in a battle with their own unresolved feelings, unable or unwilling to confront the truth of their emotions. It is through honest, open dialogue that this mask can be lifted, and the underlying hostility can be brought to light. At times, the secret hatred of someone close to us can be veiled beneath a veneer of control and manipulation. When a person feels threatened or inferior, they may respond by attempting to dominate or manipulate those around them. This behavior often arises from unconscious insecurity, a desperate attempt to assert power and maintain a sense of control in a world that feels chaotic and unpredictable. The need to control becomes a defense mechanism against their own feelings of vulnerability and helplessness. The person who seeks to control may seem, on the surface, to be well-intentioned, perhaps offering unsolicited advice or attempting to steer the relationship in a particular direction. However, the underlying intent is not care or concern, but an effort to dominate and assert superiority. The act of controlling, whether through subtle suggestions or overt demands, serves to protect the person from confronting their own inner instability. They seek to mold the world around them according to their own fears and desires, and they do so by manipulating those closest to them. This behavior, while born out of fear, is damaging to both parties. It creates an unhealthy dynamic where one person's needs and desires are perpetually suppressed in favor of the others. End quote. Over time, this leads to feelings of resentment, not just from the person being manipulated, but also from the one who feels the constant need to control. It is a cyclical pattern of disempowerment, where the true feelings of both individuals remain hidden, distorted by their unconscious drives. To confront this behavior, it is necessary to assert one's autonomy without falling into the trap of conflict or retaliation. Control thrives in environments where communication is stifled, where each party is afraid to speak the truth of their feelings. By fostering openness and honesty, one can begin to break the cycle of manipulation, allowing space for genuine connection to emerge. Only when both parties recognize and address the unconscious drives at play can the relationship become balanced and authentic. A more subtle, yet deeply impactful, sign of hidden animosity is the presence of an unspoken coldness. It is not a direct rejection or explicit anger, but a pervasive emotional distance that creates a sense of isolation. This coldness can be felt in the lack of warmth in one's voice, in the absence of emotional connection, or in the reluctance to engage on a deeper level. It is an energetic wall that silently communicates, "I am not open to you, I do not welcome you." This coldness is often the result of emotional withdrawal, a defense mechanism that arises when one feels hurt or threatened but is unable to express these feelings openly. Rather than confronting their emotions directly, the individual retreats inward, closing themselves off from the other person. It is a form of silent protest, a way of communicating displeasure without having to articulate it. The coldness is often deeply unconscious, stemming from repressed feelings of anger, fear, or jealousy. For the person on the receiving end of this coldness, it can be particularly bewildering. There is no overt conflict, no obvious source of tension, yet the emotional distance is palpable. This coldness creates a sense of alienation, as though the person you once felt close to has somehow disappeared, leaving only a hollow shell behind. It is a painful experience, as it feels as though you are being rejected without explanation. To heal this, both individuals must confront the underlying emotional causes of the coldness. The person who withdraws must find the courage to express their true feelings, to confront their own inner conflict. The other must be patient, not reacting with anger or frustration, but offering a space for dialogue. The relationship can only move forward when both parties acknowledge the distance that has formed and are willing to close the gap through honest communication and mutual understanding. Jealousy, a particularly potent form of unconscious hatred, often manifests in relationships where there is an underlying sense of competition. This behavior is born of insecurity, a deep-seated fear that one will not be good enough, that they will be overshadowed by another. Rather than acknowledge these feelings directly, the person becomes envious of the other's success, happiness, or achievements. This envy leads to a covert hostility that undermines the other person, either through subtle sabotage or indirect criticisms. In relationships, jealousy can be particularly damaging, as it creates a competitive dynamic where mutual support and care should exist. Instead of celebrating the success of the other, the jealous individual feels threatened, and in response, they either withdraw affection or engage in passive-aggressive tactics. This creates a toxic environment where love and appreciation are replaced by rivalry and suspicion. Such behavior often stems from a fear of being eclipsed, of losing one's sense of self-worth in comparison to the other. This fear is deeply unconscious, for the individual may not even be aware of the extent to which their jealousy drives their actions. They may mask it with false displays of kindness or indifference, yet their behavior betrays their true feelings. To address jealousy in a relationship, both parties must first acknowledge the roots of their insecurities. Jealousy is not a simple emotion, it is a reflection of the unresolved fears and desires within the individual. Rather than allowing it to fester and poison the relationship, it must be brought to the surface, where it can be addressed through open dialogue. Only then can the bond be strengthened and the destructive forces of competition be replaced by mutual respect and support. One of the most insidious signs of hidden resentment is when someone constantly deflects responsibility for their actions and places blame on you or others. In such a situation, you may feel as though you are under constant scrutiny, with every misstep or failure being attributed to your shortcomings. The individual, rather than confronting their own flaws or failings, projects their sense of guilt, shame, or inadequacy onto others. This defensive mechanism, often unconscious, is a means of avoiding the difficult task of self-reflection. When we refuse to take responsibility for our actions, we enter into a cycle of denial, where we avoid facing our own dark side, the parts of ourselves that we wish to disown. This is the essence of the shadow, that unconscious part of our psyche that we repress because it is too painful to confront. By shifting the blame onto others, the person maintains an illusion of purity, an image of themselves that is untainted by fault or imperfection. This allows them to avoid facing the deeper emotional truths that lie within. However, This tactic of deflection is not without consequences. The individual who continually blames others is, in fact, creating an emotional distance from those around them. By refusing to take ownership of their actions, they rob others of their agency and create an environment of disconnection. You may begin to feel that no matter what you do, it will never be enough, for the blame will always fall on you, never on the person who perpetuates it. To counter this behavior, one must recognize that the blame game is a projection of the individual's own unresolved feelings. It is important to remain grounded and avoid internalizing the blame that is being placed upon you. At the same time, it is vital to encourage open and honest communication, allowing the person to acknowledge their own role in the situation. Only by confronting their own shortcomings can the cycle of blame be broken and true healing can begin. Another subtle sign of hidden hostility arises when someone close to you consistently dismisses your feelings and needs. When you attempt to express vulnerability, to communicate your desires or concerns, they may respond with indifference or, worse, invalidate your experiences. They may brush off your emotions as unimportant, or even go so far as to belittle you for feeling the way you do. This behavior is an unconscious mechanism for avoiding emotional intimacy and protecting themselves from the vulnerability that comes with being truly seen. This dismissal often stems from a deep fear of intimacy. When a person is unable to face their own vulnerability, they project this fear onto others. To acknowledge the feelings of another person requires one to also confront their own, which can feel overwhelming and threatening. Rather than facing this fear, the person may resort to dismissing your needs in an attempt to maintain emotional distance. This rejection can create a deep sense of isolation, as it sends the message that your feelings do not matter. In relationships, such behavior is particularly damaging because it erodes trust and understanding. When one person's feelings are continually invalidated, it creates an emotional divide. Over time, this divide can grow into a chasm, making it more difficult to reconnect. You may find yourself questioning the validity of your own emotions, wondering if perhaps you are the one who is unreasonable or demanding. To address this, it is essential to assert your emotional needs without guilt or hesitation. Your feelings are valid, and they deserve to be heard and respected. At the same time, it is important to recognize that the person who dismisses your feelings is likely doing so out of their own fear and insecurity. Compassion and patience are necessary, but you must also set boundaries that protect your emotional well-being and ensure that your needs are met. A person who secretly harbors resentment may show signs of bitterness or envy, particularly when it comes to your achievements or success. Rather than celebrating your victories, they may diminish or ignore your accomplishments altogether. They may act indifferent, or worse, find subtle ways to undermine the significance of your success. This behavior is often rooted in feelings of jealousy or inadequacy, where the individual is unable to confront the reality of their own limitations. The inability to celebrate another's success is a reflection of unresolved inner conflict. It is a projection of their own feelings of inferiority, which manifest as resentment toward those they perceive as more successful. Their inability to acknowledge your achievements stems from a fear of being overshadowed, of losing their sense of self-worth in comparison to yours. Rather than face this fear directly, they lash out in the only way they know how, by belittling or ignoring the accomplishments of others. Over time, this behavior can create an imbalance in the relationship. Rather than feeling supported and uplifted, you may feel diminished and alienated. The lack of encouragement or recognition from someone you trust can undermine your sense of self and erode the connection between you. You may begin to question whether they truly care for you, or if their resentment runs deeper than you initially realized. To counter this, it is important to surround yourself with individuals who genuinely celebrate your success and support your growth. Understand that the inability of another to celebrate you is not a reflection of your worth, but rather a sign of their own unresolved inner conflict. If possible, address the underlying tension directly, offering space for honest conversation about the feelings that have been suppressed. Only through open dialogue can the relationship begin to heal and move past the barriers of envy and resentment. One of the most telling signs of hidden animosity is the unwillingness to admit fault or apologize for their actions. When someone is truly unable to face their own mistakes, it often reveals a deep resistance to vulnerability and self-examination. Instead of acknowledging their wrongdoings, they may deflect, rationalize, or deny their actions, refusing to take responsibility for the hurt they have caused. This resistance stems from the fear that admitting fault will expose them to criticism or rejection, which they are unable to bear. The inability to apologize is a defense mechanism, a way to protect the ego from the discomfort of self-reflection. It arises from an unconscious fear of being perceived as weak or flawed. For such individuals, to admit fault is to risk the collapse of the idealized self-image they have constructed. Rather than confront their own imperfections, they project blame onto others, thus avoiding the painful task of introspection. This dynamic can be incredibly damaging to relationships. When apologies are withheld and fault is never acknowledged, it leaves the other person feeling unheard, invalidated, and unimportant. The lack of accountability fosters a sense of injustice, where one person is always left to carry the emotional burden of the relationship. This imbalance can lead to feelings of bitterness and resentment, as trust and mutual respect are undermined. To heal this, it is important to encourage a culture of accountability and empathy within the relationship. A willingness to acknowledge one's own mistakes is essential for growth and connection. When both parties take responsibility for their actions, the relationship can move toward greater understanding and mutual respect. If the other person refuses to apologize or acknowledge their faults, you must decide whether this dynamic is something you are willing to tolerate or whether it is time to create distance for the sake of your own emotional well-being. Perhaps one of the most painful signs of hidden hatred is the absence of support during times of crisis or hardship. When you are in need of emotional support, the person who secretly harbors ill may withdraw or act indifferent to your suffering. This lack of empathy can be a powerful indication that their feelings toward you are not as positive as they may appear. Instead of offering comfort or understanding, they may seem detached, even indifferent to your pain. This absence of support is often born from a deep-rooted inability to connect with others on an emotional level. The individual may be unwilling or incapable of offering genuine support because it requires vulnerability and a willingness to confront the emotional needs of the other person. Rather than offering empathy, they withdraw, either because they feel unable to face their own emotions or because they are unconsciously resentful of your distress. During difficult times, we come to rely on the people closest to us for comfort and reassurance. When that support is absent or withheld, it creates a profound sense of abandonment and emotional isolation. It is not simply the lack of assistance that stings, but the realization that someone you trusted is unwilling to stand by you in your time of need. This can be a devastating blow to any relationship. To address this, it is crucial to assess the emotional climate of the relationship and whether it is capable of offering the support and care that you require. If the absence of support is a recurring pattern, it may be necessary to confront the issue directly, seeking to understand the underlying causes. However, if the person remains unwilling or unable to offer support, it may be time to reconsider the emotional investment you place in this relationship, for your well-being must come first. In conclusion, recognizing the subtle signs of hidden hostility in someone close to you can be a deeply unsettling experience. As we've explored, Behaviors like passive aggression, emotional withdrawal, manipulation, and jealousy often stem from unconscious fears and unresolved inner conflicts. These signs, though sometimes imperceptible, can serve as mirrors to the deeper psychological truths within both the person exhibiting them and ourselves. The key to navigating such dynamics is awareness. As Carl Jung taught us, we cannot truly understand others without first understanding ourselves. When we recognize the shadow within others, those unconscious traits they project onto us, we are also called to confront our own shadows, our own unresolved fears and projections. Relationships are a dance of the conscious and unconscious, and it is only through awareness and acceptance of the complexities within us all that we can break free from unhealthy patterns. Remember, it is not your responsibility to carry the emotional burden of others. Setting boundaries and fostering honest, open communication is essential to creating relationships built on mutual respect, trust, and emotional honesty. If someone close to you consistently shows signs of hidden resentment or animosity, it is crucial to assess the health of that relationship and whether it is worth continuing. Protecting your emotional well-being should always be a priority. In the words of Carl Jung, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. As we move forward, may we seek to understand the shadows in both ourselves and others, embracing the truth that only through genuine self-awareness and compassion can we foster healthier, more authentic connections.